Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inshallah, I will try my best to summarize what Shaykh has just mentioned to us. So, at the start, Shaykh mentioned a parable, and he says that sometimes when a person gets a wound and the wound starts to heal, a person realizes that although on the surface level it's starting to get better, on the inside there's still a lot of dirt inside the wound, and the person's flesh has not completely healed yet. And when a person cuts open that wound, if a person, sorry, were to cut open that wound to see inside, he would see that the wound is not fully healed just yet and it needs more time, right? So the parable that he presents is that there will come a time, Rasulullah says, there will come a time in my nation where people will be similar to this in terms of their amana. So there will come a time where it will, on the outside, it will look like, this person, mashallah, has a lot of amana. He's a trustworthy individual. Once you make a deal with him and you trust him with something, that person will come in his true colors, and you will realize that this person is not a trustworthy individual. This is not a person you can trust. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all. Then he mentions that amana, trust, is the biggest quality of our ummah, one of the biggest qualities of our ummah. And it is mentioned in the Quran. And the biggest form of amana is actually the Quran itself. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this Quran, and our responsibility is to act upon the Quran, because acting upon the Quran means we are fulfilling the amana that has been given to us in the form of the Quran by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So just like in our daily lives, we have this quality of amana, we have to act it out every single day. So all of our mu'amalat, all of our dealings that take place, they must be done in the trustworthy manner. So Shaykh mentions that, nowadays we have loans, we have all these issues with money, financial issues, and most of these issues arise for one simple reason: we're not trustworthy and we can't trust the individual that we're dealing with. And secondly, he says one of the biggest forms of amana is in speech. So a person tells you a secret, by the end of that day, that secret is known in the entire community, because a person does not have amana, he does not have trust, he does not keep the secret of his brother. He also says that when it comes to the loan, when it comes to the qard, normally you will find that people, when they take this loan, when they first approach the individual and say, look, I'm in need of this money, I need some money, I have this issue, I have that issue, he's very nice and he's very calm. He's trying to convince the other individual, please give me the money. Once he receives that money, what happens? After time goes by and now it's come time to pay off that money, the person becomes harsh and he becomes rude, and he tries his best to avoid that individual, and he doesn't want to pay that money back anymore. So he says this is not the amana that we have been taught. This is against the teachings of Islam, and we have to make sure that if we make a promise, we have to keep this promise. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he did not like for a person to go into debt. Why was this? Shaykh mentions two main reasons. He says the first reason is that a person, when he's in debt, the first thing he does is he lies. He begins to lie. Why? So he can get extra time to pay. Why? So maybe it's possible the person may reduce some money from the loan. And the second thing he does is he starts to cheat. He starts to deceive the other people into thinking that perhaps this loan was not the amount given, it was less, or perhaps the due date is later than it is. Whatever it may be, these are the two qualities that come inside a person when a person takes a loan. Normally, a person tries to lie his way out, or a person tries to deceive the other individual, which is why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not like when his followers took loans, and he warned us when you take a loan, you should try your best to fulfill it on time. This does not mean that you're not allowed to take a loan. Obviously, the taking a loan is allowed, and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself took a loan. But the reason Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam took a loan was to show permissibility to the rest of the ummah, to the people coming, that this is not something that's forbidden in Islam. Rather, it's risky. And when you take on something that's risky, you have to make sure that you are ready to fulfill it. You are ready to give that loan back. So in Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam's case, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam took a loan from a Jewish man, and as collateral, he left his armor with him. So after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away and he was unable to pay that loan during his lifetime, Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu paid that loan for him and then retrieved that armor from the Jewish man. So it shows that we are allowed to take loans, but we shouldn't take loans that we know we're not going to be able to pay back. And if we do take a loan, then we have to make sure that when the due date arrives, we should make enough arrangements for ourselves that we're able to pay back that loan properly without giving the other individual any trouble. He mentions that today, for the weddings that take place, especially for the weddings of our daughters, we take like thousands and thousands of dollars in loans so that we can have this fancy and lavish wedding. But we don't realize that we don't even think, sorry, at the moment, how are we going to pay that loan back? We just take the loan, we have fun, we celebrate, and then when it comes time for us to pay that loan back to the individual, we give him a very hard time. So this is inappropriate, and this is ruining the aspect of Sharia in a person's life. This is wrecking your iman for the sake of the worldly passion, and this is inappropriate. We should stay away from this. There was a Sahabi, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he was looking into the sky and he read a verse, إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ. Now, the point of this, reading this verse, is that the Sahabi was pondering, he was looking into the sky and he was pondering and he was saying, how beautiful is the sky Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created, and he was pondering upon the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And while he was doing this, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he received revelation, and he says to the Sahaba, he says, I just got information from Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam that there was an individual who was looking at the sky and he was reading this verse. And Allah has forgiven his entire life's sin. What's the point of this? What lesson can we learn from this story? The lesson that we learned is that this is also a form of amana. Our eyes, our ears, our tongue, these are all a form of amana. So when a person sees, looks at something, when a person speaks, when a person hears, he chooses what to see, he chooses what to hear. So we have to make sure we choose to see the right thing. And when we choose to see the right thing, then things like this happen. Where the Sahabi was looking at the sky and pondering, and he was obviously looking at the right thing, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided that this was such a good act, that this is worthy of having all of his sins forgiven. Shaykh then mentioned 3 qualities that every single Nabi had, and every single Prophet brought out these qualities. The 3 qualities are that number 1, they were complete in terms of their intellect, aql. Number 2, they were complete in terms of their ilm, knowledge. And number 3, they were complete in terms of their haya, modesty. And a few examples that he mentions, he says, number 1, Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, he announced his prophethood. And there was a philosopher at the time, and this philosopher decided to test him, because he says, obviously if this is a prophet, there's nobody that's going to be more intellectual than a prophet. So if I ask him a question, he should be able to give me an appropriate answer. And if he gives me an appropriate answer, that proves to me that he is a prophet. So he went to Musa alayhi salatu wasalam and he told him, look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything. So let's say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides to turn the earth into a bow. Or in today's terms, you can say into a rifle, right? And you have the arrows that are in form of all of creation. If any individual is on the earth, is he safe from that bow and arrow? Is there any way that that person is going to be able to escape? Because everything around you is the arrow and the entire earth is the bow. So an average individual, when thinking about a question like this, will say, no, it's not possible. How are you going to escape something like that? Musa alayhi salatu wasalam obviously was a Nabi, a messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he knew better. So Musa alayhi salatu wasalam responded. He said that, yes, it's possible for a person to escape. How is it possible? Musa alayhi salatu wasalam says, if you stand right beside the individual that's taking the shot, it's possible. In other words, if you stand with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you do istighfar and you stay in the guardianship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will be saved even if the situation is like this. Secondly, another example he mentions is that Hiraql, who was the king at the time of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he sent a messenger, he sent a person to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he told that person, he said, this is a letter that you have to deliver to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when he reads this letter, I want you to just notice one thing. Notice if he has anything to say about the night. If he mentions the night in any form, when you give him this letter and when he reads the letter of mine. What was inside that letter? Hiraql had written inside that letter that you mentioned Jannah to us. You told us about all the blessings in Jannah and all the good things about Jannah. Why don't you mention to us about Jahannam? Why don't you mention the hellfire and all of the evil that is inside it? So when he read the letter, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he responded and he said, what's the need for having night when the daylight is out? What that means is, what's the need for telling a person about Jahannam when we've already established that Jannah exists? Jannah should be enough for an individual to strive towards the good. So he mentioned night. He mentioned the parable, the example of night. And this again is an example of intellect, the complete intellect of a Nabi. Secondly, he mentions the haya, the complete modesty and decency of all the prophets. Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, he left his country, he left Egypt and he went towards Madian when he was being prosecuted by Fir'aun. When he did this, he came across a well and he saw multiple shepherds that were taking their animals out to give them water to serve the animals. And he also noticed there were two ladies on the side and they weren't feeding their animals. So he went up to them, he asked them, he said, why don't you feed your animals? They said, we have these individuals that are much stronger than us, the farmers, they come, our father's old, he's not able to come to the well anymore. So we have to wait until every single person feeds their animals, and then after that we get our turn. So he said, okay, I will help you out today. So he goes, he lifts the stone up, and he moves it to the side, and the animals come, they take their drink, and they leave. So when the daughters go home, they arrive much earlier than expected. So Shu'aib alayhi salatu wasalam, another prophet of Allah, who was their father, he says, why did you come so early? What happened? So they say, well, today there was this individual. Normally we wait for a very long time, but today there was this individual who helped us out. And because of that, we were able to come home early. And so she also tells him, she says, oh father, you should hire this individual because he's a very trustworthy individual and he's also a very strong man. So Shu'aib alayhi salatu wasalam, he says, okay, go bring him. When the daughter of Musa alayhi salatu Shu'aib alayhi salatu wasalam came to Musa alayhi salam and wanted to guide him back to the house, Musa alayhi salatu wasalam told her, you walk behind me, not in front of me, behind me, so I don't see you. And secondly, whenever there comes a time where we have to take a turn, right or left, don't speak to me. I wouldn't like if I heard your voice. Don't speak to me. I prefer that you throw a rock, a pebble, in the direction that I'm supposed to go, and I will see that pebble and I will follow that path. That is complete modesty, complete haya shown in the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam. Lastly, Shaykh mentions that, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam made it very, very easy upon our ummah. He made it very easy in the sense that all of the things that were made difficult upon the previous nations, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And because of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removed those things from our ummah. He removed those things from our nation. For example, many things were haram upon the Banu Israel. One example Shaykh gave was the camel meat. It was haram upon the Banu Israel. The fat that was attached to the meat of the goats and the cows, that was haram upon the Banu Israel. But Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah ta'ala made that halal for us. And there are so many other things, right? For example, we have been forgiven in terms of our mistakes and forgetfulness. Anytime we mistakenly do something, we forgetfully do something, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forgiven that. He gives an example. He says that, at the time of Fajr, if a person was to set an alarm and fall asleep, and he didn't wake up even though he set that alarm, what does that mean? That means that person will get no sins. So what the point of the whole thing is that any person that tries to make a point that Sharia is too difficult for me to follow, it's not. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam has made Sharia very easy for us. Asking dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah ta'ala has also made Sharia very easy for us. So it is up to us to try and follow to the best of our ability. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the ability to practice upon what has been said.
الحمد لله الذي أنعم على المؤمنين بالخلق العظيم سبحانه، حض على الأخلاق وحذر من سوءها ليجعل المسلمين فضلاء يعيشون بالخلق فتنشأ بينهم المودة والرحمة. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله الذي قال عنه ربه وإنك لعلى خلق عظيم، وقال عن نفسه إنما بعثت لأتمم مكارم الأخلاق. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد، أيها الإخوة المسلمون، أراد الله للمسلم أن يعيش وسط إخوانه في أمن وإطمئنان، فجمعهم جميعا تحت لا إله إلا الله، وأرسى لهم قواعد الأخلاق حتى تقوم المودة بينهم وتكون لهم سماتهم المعروفة. ولسلفنا الصالح حديث عن الخلق، فقد قال الحسن رحمه الله تعالى: الخلق بسط الوجه وبذل الندى وكف الأذى، وقال إرضاء الخلق في السراء والضراء، وقيل غير ذلك مما هو من حسن الخلق. فيا إخوة الأحبة، إن الإسلام الحنيف يستهدف تنظيم علاقة الإنسان بربه عن طريق الطاعة والعبادة، كما يهدف إلى تحسين علاقة الإنسان بالمجتمع الذي يعيش فيه بما وضع من قواعد وقرر من قوانين، ونظم ذات الصلة الوثيقة بالسلوك الفردي والاجتماعي والقيم الأخلاقية والأدبية التي تصلح أساسا طيبا للمعاملة، كي يعيش الناس إخوة متحابين متفاهمين لا يمسهم نصب ولا تجافي بينهم عداوة. ومن بين تلك الأدب والقيم أن يعامل المسلم الناس بروح الإيمان والصدق، وأن يتحرى معهم طريق الصراحة والوضوح كي يكسب ثقة الناس واحترامهم وحبهم ورضاءهم. أيها المسلم، إن الإسلام ليس دين اعتداء وعدوان وبغض، وإنما أمرنا أيضا بألا نظلم غير المسلمين وأن نعدل معه إن لم يكن محاربا للمسلمين. قال تعالى: لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين لم يقاتلوكم في الدين ولم يخرجوكم من دياركم أن تبروهم وتقسطوا إليهم إن الله يحب المقسطين. وعلى المسلم أن يرحم الكل برحمة عامة كطعامهم وسقهم ومداواتهم، وعدم أذيتهم في مالهم ولا في دمهم ولا في عرضهم، كما يجوز أن يهدي لهم أو تقبل منهم هديتهم. أيها الأخ المسلم، هذه الأمور التي ذكرتها لك اليوم عن تعاليم الإسلام لنا حتى نعلم حقوق إخواننا ونعلم كيف نعاملهم، فإذا تمسكنا بتعاليم الإسلام فزنا فوزا كبيرا. وأما إذا تعاملنا مع الناس بهوائنا وبأغراضنا فسوف نضل ضلالا كبيرا. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. فعلينا أن نتخلق بأخلاق رسولنا الكريم صلى الله عليه وسلم، وأن نتبع ولا نبتدع من عند أنفسنا، والتائب من الذنب كمن لا ذنب له. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه، ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له، ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى: إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى جميع إخوانه من الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين، خصوصا على الخلفاء الراشدين المهديين أبي بكر وعمر وعثمان وعلي رضي الله تعالى عنهم. اللهم أيد الإسلام وأنصاره وأذل الشرك وأشراره. اللهم وفقنا لما تحب وترضى، واجعل آخرتنا خيرا من الأولى. اللهم انصر من نصر دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم واجعلنا منهم، واخذل من خذل دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا تجعلنا منهم. عباد الله رحمكم الله، إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي، يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. فاذكروني أذكركم واشكروا لي ولا تكفرون. أقم للصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. يا للصلاح يا للصلاة يا للفلاح يا للفلاح. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. أفحسب الذين كفروا أن يتخذوا عبادي من دوني أولياء، إنا أعتدنا جهنم للكافرين نزلا. قل هل ننبئكم بالأخسرين أعمالا، الذين ضل سعيهم في الحياة الدنيا وهم يحسبون أنهم يحسنون صنعا أولئك الذين كفروا بآيات ربهم ولقائه فحبطت أعمالهم فلا نقيم لهم يوم القيامة وزنا ذلك جزاؤهم جهنم بما كفروا واتخذوا آياتي ورسلي هزوا. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات كانت لهم جنات الفردوس نزلا خالدين فيها لا يبغون عنها حولا قل لو كان البحر مدادا لكلمات ربي لنفد البحر قبل أن تنفد كلمات ربي ولو جئنا بمثله مددا قل إنما أنا بشر مثلكم يوحى إلي أنما إلهكم إله واحد فمن كان يرجو لقاء ربه فليعمل عملا صالحا ولا يشرك بعبادة ربه أحدا. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. سبحان ربي الوهاب. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. رب اجعلني مقيم الصلاة ومن ذريتي. اللهم ربنا وتقبل دعاء. ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب. اللهم رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا. اللهم رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا. اللهم ربنا اصرف عنا عذاب جهنم إن عذابها كان غراما. اللهم أعنا على ذكرك وشكرك وحسن عبادتك. اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام تبارك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.